All right, so we've got about another
Hey,
week.
Rick.
Yeah.
Sorry, headset just stopped working. I was just saying hey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Okay. And yeah, so we've got about a week and a half left. And this last half week is just all kind of questions. So by this time next Friday, we'll have gotten through. Oops, this is the wrong one. I got to look at the right one here. Where am I? Yeah, we're doing this one, but not on questions. Exam 2. Uh, 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 uh. But we got about 2 weeks left, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this one ends the 21st or the 24th. So today's the 7th, so 2 weeks. All right. So let's go finish up inventory. Make sure I got the recording on. Hopefully. Yep, we're good. Okay. So inventory accuracy and integrity. So the stock keeping unit, or SKU, is an individual item that is stocked at a specific storage facility. It's one piece of one part, basically. A unique number or barcode differentiates each SKU or part family. I don't know that each quantity is differentiated by a barcode, but SKUs can have meaningful part number or non-meaningful ones. It's always handier if they have meaningful part numbers. So no two SKUs can have the same part number. Random number works well. Although I did this at one smaller company I worked at, we just started part numbering, started with one and went on up to a couple thousand. But it's better if you got smart part numbers that are, part families and stuff like that. RFID tags are used in many situations when unique ID is necessary. Yeah, if you got money. Physical inventory. In manufacturing, physical inventory is classified as raw material, work in progress, and finished goods, and MRO. And when ISM uses the term MRO, they mean maintenance, repair, and operating supplies. In retail, most inventory is held as finished goods, which is the nature of retail. RFID has made it easier to track physical inventory and has also improved inventory accuracy, except for it costs too much. Cycle counting, we've covered before, usually used in conjunction with ABC classification system. So the process is to count certain part numbers or categories of parts on a frequency equal to the level of importance. So the A parts are the 20% of the parts that cost 80% of the money. And you cycle count those A parts weekly or more frequently than the B and C parts. The B parts are the next 15 to 20% of parts, and then the C parts are usually the last half, which costs like 20% of them or 10% of the money. And you usually try to get the supplier to count that junk. But in cycle counting program, you'll cycle count some A parts every week and probably a few B parts. You probably won't ever cycle count C parts. A select number of parts are usually counted each week. If the records are inaccurate, a root cause must be determined. So on cycle counting, the whole idea is you don't have to do physical inventory all the time. You can just, if your cycle counting is accurate, then your records are accurate and there's no need to do physical inventory. But if your cycle counting is off every week, then you got problems and you probably have to do a physical inventory to count everything and adjust your records. So reconciliation. Inventory is counted in cycle counting or physical inventory and compared against the records for the item. So if you ever get the chance, our factories do physical inventories usually once a year, and they're always looking for help. You go out there and you get these slips and you go count what you see on the shelf. Usually what they'll use you for is entering data into the computer. Because they usually use the guys in the factory floor to go count it because they know where the stuff's at. But what happens once you enter it all in the computer, if the computer doesn't match the count that you got, then you got to reconcile and figure out what happened. Significant variances must be reviewed and root causes determined. Another form of reconciliation is to compare open orders at a supplier with MRP demand or customer orders. Our materials guys will do this on a regular basis with certain suppliers. PPD also does it or should do it. Shrinkage, otherwise known as theft. Shrinkage is the reduction in inventory that occurs when items are lost, stolen, or misplaced. It may occur naturally through evaporation, age, or expiration. During certain production processes, there may be a loss of material due to the nature of the process. It gets burned up or whatever. Yield loss, would be called a yield loss, and it's a form of shrinkage. Yield is defined as the ratio of usable output to input. So if you got a 90% yield, then you got 10% of shrinkage. Issue return to stores. Inventory involves keeping it in a known location until there's demand for it. So the steps involved with storing or receiving inventory. You got to receive the part, you got to issue a record, you got to determine a location, then you got to put the thing away. And kitting, you got to pick it, you got to stage it or kit it and deliver it. And this is what our MSS guys do. Returns occur for a variety of reasons. Since this generates more labor, many companies require a restocking fee of around 20%. And most of the time when I ran into it was 15 to 20%. And it's much better to pay that restocking fee and give it back to the supplier than it is to try to sell that in the open market, because you're probably only going to get 10 cents on the dollar or 2 cents on the dollar if you try to sell it in the secondhand market. Often an RMA or return material authorization is required. And most companies will require some kind of return material authorization so they know what it is, why it's coming back to them. Recoup, a process that recovers losses in inventory when disposal is necessary due to obsolescence or damage. And why do I have obsolescence? Let's see what's highlighted here. Monthly metric, inventory age. This will just tell you all about aging inventory. Sell inventory on the open market. Like I say, usually going to get 2 to 10% on the dollar. Sell excess inventory back to the supplier minus a restock fee. You're recouping the inventory dollars. Re-engineer the component for use elsewhere, which is pretty rare. And rework the item as an alternative part, which is also pretty rare. Use as a spare part. Maybe donate to a nonprofit. You can do that for a tax deduction. Sell for scrap. We do that with some stuff. Or scrap at zero, which means you throw it in the trash. Inventory consolidation, you can reduce the amount of inventory on hand as well as consolidating inventory at multiple locations. So reducing safety stock is also an inventory consolidation. Staging or kitting is another form of inventory consolidation. It's like, I don't really agree with that, but that's where ISM comes from, because you're not really consolidating it, you're just moving it someplace else. Security, access to inventory must be limited due to reduce shrinkage, especially if you got high value items in a warehouse. People steal them. So we've talked about CTPAT before, and we do that. It's our guys down on floor 2, the logistics guys that work with the customs and Border Patrol folks. And it's just a way of getting your stuff through customs quicker. It's a program that the Border Patrol guys came up with. ISO 28000 series. It's a series of standards on supply chain management security. Not super popular, but I don't know if we do it or not. Importing organizations are responsible for the goods from the time the container leaves the factory where the goods are produced to the time they get them. This will require change in Incoterms to either XWorks or FCA. So if you got XWorks or FCA, that means you're picking up from their factory in Mexico or wherever, and PACCAR is responsible for that container once they pick it up. The use of RFID tags will record the dimensions and weight of the items placed in the container. It can be compared with what they are expected to be by customs, so they can just weigh the container and know if it's close. Inventory policies and procedures. Best-in-class warehouses have solid procedures that address things like safety, recycling, standardization, inventory accuracy and cycle counting procedures, allowable tolerance for adjusting low-level C items during cycle counting. So you're not going to probably do a root cause analysis on why you're missing 5 washers. Procurement policies, economic order policy, lot size multiplier, minimum buys, etc. And location of materials, how and where items are stored depends on the method of movement to get them there. So high risk or high value items are kept in secure areas. Hazardous goods are also got in special structures. If trailers are used for storage, they need to be included in the inventory system as locations, which is what our plants do because they end up storing a lot of stuff in trailers. Master data management provides an accurate master repository which can be accessed by all the software such as MRP, ERP, etc. Access to update data must be controlled and limited. You can't let anybody go in there and update the data because they all spell the names differently and they all name the item differently. It gets to be a mess. Establish minimum data requirements, implement QC checks and reliable processes. And timely transactions. Failure to record inventory transactions in a timely manner results in inaccurate inventory levels in the ERP system. We have this problem when we receive at our factories. We call it a RIP. So they just take the pack slip and they punch it into the ERP system that they received it. But a lot of times they'll just let these pack slips stack up on their desk for 2 or 3 days or a week and not get around to receiving anything. And then they receive it all at once. So that causes problems with the ERP systems because they're not doing a timely transaction. The cost of carry. So there's another article on the cost of carry if you want to know more about it. This is another one of these monthly metric things from ISM. Yep. Inventory carrying cost. It's basically made up of 4 things. And the different people call them different names, but they're generally the same 4 areas. Finance costs, use the organization's short-term borrowing rate or investment ROI, and opportunity cost of invested funds, which is, usually a bank rate. You could just park the cash in the bank instead of you sticking it into inventory. Ownership costs, which are taxes and insurance. And risk costs, this is theft, damage, obsolescence, with obsolescence being the biggest one because you changed the part, now you no longer need the 500 you got on the shelf. And then overhead costs, which is the storage and handling of the actual material, the warehouse and that stuff. Inventory is a percentage of sales, is a way of measuring inventory. Should remain below 50%. So your inventory cost should not be above 50% of your sales. And it's a good metric for growing companies to make sure they don't have too much or too little inventory on hand. And then they got the inventory turnover ratio. This is another monthly metric that you can read more about if you're interested. A very common metric, our materials guys are usually measured on this, measures how frequently a company transfers product from a warehouse to a consumer, or how long our inventory sits at our plants before it's put on a truck. Calculated by dividing the annual cost of goods sold by the average annual inventory. So cost of goods sold comes from the income statement, and the average inventory is calculated from the balance sheet by adding the inventory at the end of the period to the value of the inventory at the end of the prior period. So beginning inventory, ending inventory, you add them together and you divide by 2. And that'll give you your average inventory. And then you've got the good old EOQ. So this may work if you're buying like a rock hopper or something like that, but I haven't really seen it used much in actual industry. It's mostly taught in school. But the order cost is always a little tricky to try and figure out what it costs. And here's another article on if you want to attempt that. ISM had a guy look at it and say, this is basically what goes into order cost. How much does it cost to write the PO, receive the part, etc.? It's usually overestimated by companies, but according to these guys, a manufacturing company like us, the order cost is usually around $300. Cost to carry, which is the holding cost, is calculated by the company's finance department. We just got through talking about that. It's rents, insurance, taxes, all that good kind of stuff. And it usually is underestimated by companies. So you're overestimating order cost and you're underestimating cost to carry. Usually cost to carry can run anywhere from a third of the price of the part for a year up to, 3/4 of the price of the part for a year.
Hey,
So,
Rick,
yeah,
quick question. So I was reviewing this yesterday. This was a question I got wrong. Is that what's the 2 for?
I
So,
don't know. So some PhD guy says it's
of
two
course.
times it's two
Yeah.
times annual usage in units, and there's a
Okay.
mathematical proof that shows you why it needs to be that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Got it.
yeah. So I mean, basically, when you're looking at it, here's the total cost curve. Here's the annual order costs, and then here's the holding costs. So what you're trying to do is minimize the total cost, right at this point here. And it's some math guy figured this out. So it's annual usage in units, or EAU, times 2 times the order cost, which is for us would be about 300, dividing by the cost to carry. And then you take the square root of all that mess.
Yep.
So if you got an average annual usage of 100,000, cost of PO is 100, cost to carry is $1.05, you're going to end up with 4,300 units, or 4,400 units if you're rounding up, which is, you got to have a place to put that stuff. And this is the problem with EOQ, is it some of this stuff is really hard to estimate, so you end up with these really big numbers. So it's often taught in school, but rarely used in industry due to the high order quantities that usually result from the formula, because you're estimating these things incorrectly, usually. All right. Which of the following is the inventory carrying term associated with insurance and taxes on inventory? So this comes from inventory holding cost. Which
Yeah,
one?
I would go with A, finance cost.
Yeah. Insurance and taxes. I always get these things wrong. I think that might be ownership. Let's see. They never seem to be what you would think they would be. It's C. No, that's not the right question. We need to find the right question. B is correct. Costs associated with insurance and tax result from ownership. Yeah, if you go back a few slides. So finance is the short-term borrowing rate, or our investment ROI, and opportunity cost. Ownership is taxes and insurance. Risk is damage and obsolescence. And then overhead is basically cost of the building and handling. Oops. All right, so put some more questions out there because I doctored up one of the questions we did on EOQ yesterday. So go ahead and do 6 through 11. Well, get as far as you can. We'll go over them again at 3:55.
Okay.
Yeah. Ugh. Hmm. All right, Aaron, in the interest
Yep.
of getting this done, all right,
I'm ready.
let's go over some answers here. So 6, we got 2 EOQ questions here, and sometimes you'll see one, sometimes you won't, depending on the version of the test you're taking. But
Yeah. Hey, Rick. So
Yeah.
I got this first one right. Am I allowed to bring in like my Texas Instrument calculator?
No, they'll give you one.
Okay. Yeah,
They'll
it's
give
like
you
how
one. Yeah.
I don't think a
Yeah, because you're
generic
doing this,
calculator
but
does a square root.
yeah, they have a calculator. Most calculators, the cheap ones even do the square roots.
Oh,
So yeah, so
okay.
you know how to finish this one. The tricky one for 7 was you had to convert this inventory cost. You either had to go with dozens, 2 times the dozen, or you had to convert the 0.4 divide by 12 because this is per dozen. So you
Yeah,
have to just get,
yeah.
yeah, once you get that, then it's pretty easy to figure out.
Yeah, I went with D on that one, but I didn't
Yeah,
pick up on with the shortness of time. Yeah.
yeah. All right. 8 is Charlie. Costs associated with space handling control are, I think, overhead costs. And 9 is Delta. Risk is defined as exposure to probability of loss of damage. Long materials are on hand. The higher probability. I was thinking that was finance, but I guess risk would be right. 10 is Alpha. Inventory holding costs are typically the highest. And this is why you don't want to do 100% service. Always have the part on hand. And 11 is Bravo. Costs associated with insurance and taxes are ownership costs. All right. We will talk to you on Monday.
Great. Thank you, Rick.
All right. See ya.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye.